I packed my work bag in 11 minutes flat. I know because I watched the clock the whole time, just to have something to look at that wasn't my mother-in-law's face. I'm 31. I work as a freelance UX designer, which means I work from home. Which means the room I use as my studio is not optional. It's not a hobby room. It's not a guest bedroom I happen to put a monitor in. It's where I spend 40 to 50 hours a week, where I take client calls, where I run user testing sessions, where I earn the money that for the past 14 months had been paying 63% of the household expenses. Let me back up. My husband and I bought our house 3 years ago. A 3-bedroom in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. We saved for 4 years for that down payment. The 3rd bedroom became my studio immediately. I set it up before we even unpacked the kitchen. Standing desk, dual monitors, good lighting for video calls, a shelf of reference books I've had since grad school. That room was mine in every way that mattered. Then my mother-in-law's lease ended. She'd been renting an apartment in Dayton, about an hour away, and her landlord was selling the building. She had 60 days. My husband, who I love deeply but who has a very hard time saying the word no to his mother, suggested she stay with us temporarily while she figured out her next move. Just a few months, he said. 3, maybe 4. I want to be clear. I said yes, I did. I helped set up the guest room for her. I bought new towels. I made space in the bathroom cabinet. I said yes because I genuinely believed it would be 3 or 4 months, and because she'd always been fine to me. A little dependent on my husband, a little prone to making her problems the loudest thing in the room, but nothing I couldn't handle for a season. That was 14 months ago. The months passed and the next move never materialized. There was always a reason. The apartments she looked at were too expensive, too small, too far from her doctor, too far from us. My husband would gently bring it up and she would cry, and then the subject would dissolve. I started handling it internally. I told myself, this is the situation, adapt. What I didn't account for was her son, my brother-in-law, who I will call what he is, a 34-year-old man who has never held a job for longer than 8 months, who moved in 6 weeks after his mother did, and who my husband also couldn't say no to. So now we had 3 adults contributing to the household and 2 of them were not contributing money. I paid our mortgage, $1,840 a month. I covered utilities, which ran between $200 and $280 depending on the season. I bought the bulk of the groceries, which crept up to about $900 a month with 4 people eating. I paid for streaming services, internet, my mother-in-law's Instacart deliveries when she didn't feel like going out. And once, I paid for a plumber when a drain clogged that she swore she had nothing to do with. My husband worked, but his income went to his car payment, his student loans, and what he called shared expenses, which in practice meant gas, the occasional dinner out, and things he wanted but didn't think of as wants. His mother paid nothing, his brother paid nothing. In 14 months I spent somewhere around $41,000 keeping our household running. I don't say that to make myself sound noble. I say it because it matters for what came next. My studio was the problem. Or rather, my brother-in-law decided my studio was the problem. He had moved into the guest room, displacing his mother, who then took over what had been our home office, a small room with a daybed we'd used for occasional visitors, and after a few months he started talking about wanting to do something online. Streaming, content creation, he wasn't sure exactly. He'd bought a microphone. He needed space. He needed good space. I heard it in pieces. My husband mentioned it casually one evening. He's thinking about setting up a streaming area, and I nodded because it didn't occur to me that this had anything to do with my room. There were other spaces, the living room, the corner of the garage we'd half finished, the actual guest room he was already occupying and refusing to make presentable. Then one Thursday morning in November, my mother-in-law knocked on my studio door while I was on a call. I held up a finger. She stood in the doorway. I finished the call, about 6 minutes, and took off my headset. I was thinking, she said. And when people lead with I was thinking in that particular tone, nothing good follows. The room downstairs, the finished part of the basement, it's actually really nice. It's quiet. You could set up down there. I looked at her. I work up here. I know. But, she glanced around the room. At my monitors, my shelving unit, the ring light I use for client-facing calls, he really needs a proper setup. He's serious about this. I'm serious about my job, I said. This is my job. It's just that your setup is so much better than what he has, and you could really work from anywhere. I work from here, I said again. Pleasantly, clearly, this is my workspace. She left. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. The following Saturday, my husband asked if we could talk. We sat in the kitchen and he walked me through a proposal. I can only call it that, because it had clearly been discussed and structured before it reached me, where I would move my equipment to the basement, his brother would use my studio, and in exchange, his brother would contribute more around the house. Help with dishes, mow the lawn. I was so caught off guard by the formality of it that I didn't say anything for a moment. You're asking me to give up my studio, I said finally. It's not giving it up, you'd still have a space, a basement, with one small window. We'd get you a good lamp. I stood up. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I said, I need you to hear me when I say this is not something I'm willing to do, and I walked back to my studio and closed the door. For a week it was quiet. Tense but quiet. I thought we were done with it. Then I came home from a rare in-person client meeting on a Tuesday afternoon and found my brother-in-law sitting in my chair, not the basement, not his room, my chair, at my desk, with one of my monitors adjusted to his eye level and my keyboard pushed to the side. He looked up, said, "Oh, we figured you'd be cool with it." I stood in the doorway of my own room and felt something happen inside my chest. Not anger, exactly. Something quieter and more permanent than anger. Like a door closing. "Get out of my chair," I said. He laughed a little, not malicious, just the laugh of someone who genuinely doesn't believe consequences apply to them, and said, "It's just for a couple hours, I'm setting up my get." Out of my chair, he got up. I sat down, I closed the door, and I didn't come out for 3 hours. That night I told my husband what had happened. He apologized. He said his brother didn't mean anything by it. He said he'd talk to him. And then the next morning I walked past my studio and heard his brother inside. The door was closed. I could hear him talking. Doing a test stream, I realized. Through my door. In my room, my husband was at work. My mother-in-law was in the kitchen making coffee. I knocked on the studio door and opened it. My ring light was on. My second monitor had been moved. There was a snack bag on my desk. "I'm recording," he said with genuine annoyance, like I was the interruption. I looked at him for a second. Then I walked to the window and looked outside at nothing, and I made a decision that I had probably been building toward for about 11 months but hadn't let myself name. I went to our bedroom and I called my best friend Naomi. I told her what was happening. She said, "Come stay with me." She lives 20 minutes away. She has a home office she doesn't use on weekends, and she'd been telling me I could work from there anytime for months. I said, "I think I need to actually do that." Then I packed. 11 minutes. Laptop. Hard drives, reference books, the ring light. I unplugged it myself, right in front of him. While he sputtered about his test stream, my headset, my chair cushion that I'd special ordered because I have lower back issues, my charging cables, and the small framed print of a quote I keep above my desk that my college roommate gave me when I graduated. I did not pack in anger. That's what I want you to understand. I packed like someone who had simply arrived at a factual conclusion. My mother-in-law came to the hallway. "What are you doing?" "Working from a friend's place for a while," I said. "You can't just. The room will be empty." "You're welcome to it," I said. I was already at the front door. I went to Naomi's. I set up in her office. I worked. I had 3 deliverables due that week and I finished all of them. I slept in her guest room, and in the mornings she made pour-over coffee and we talked about everything except my situation, which was a gift. My husband called me that evening. I let it go to voicemail. His mother texted, "We didn't mean to upset you, we just thought you were flexible." His brother texted, "The light setup in here is actually harder than it looks. Where's the adapter for the ring light?" I read that one twice. I did not respond. On the second day my husband called 4 times. I answered on the 4th. "I need you to come home," he said. "I'm working," I said. "I have everything I need. The mortgage is due Friday." There it was, 11 words, and the entire architecture of our household was visible. Not "I missed you." Not "I was wrong. The mortgage is due Friday." "I know," I said. "So you'll transfer it?" "I'll think about it," I said, and I ended the call. I want to be honest about what happened in my head during those 2 days at Naomi's. I was not playing a game. I was not strategically withholding money to teach anyone a lesson. I was genuinely sitting with a question I'd been avoiding for over a year. What is actually happening in my marriage? And do I want to keep participating in it the way it has been? Because the studio wasn't really about the studio. The studio was the chair thing, and the chair thing was the plumber and the Instacart and the 63%. And all of that was about whether my husband saw me as a partner or a resource. Whether his family saw me as a person or a service. On the 3rd morning, I called my husband and asked him to come to Naomi's. Not to fight, just to talk. He came on his lunch break. We sat at Naomi's kitchen table and I told him everything I've just told you, including the numbers. All of them. I'd actually done the math in a spreadsheet the night before, not as ammunition but because I needed to see it clearly myself. 14 months. $41,000. Zero conversations about whether this arrangement was sustainable. He was quiet for a long time. I didn't realize it was that much, he said. I know you didn't, I said. That's part of the problem. He didn't get defensive. That surprised me. He sat with it. And then he said something I hadn't heard from him in a long time. I'm sorry, I let it go too far. I let them come first when you needed to come first. I didn't cry then. I cried later in the car by myself, but not then. We talked for 2 hours about his family, about his difficulty with boundaries that goes all the way back to childhood, about the fact that his brother sitting in my chair was not an accident. It was the result of a year of small permissions that had each seemed manageable in isolation and had become collectively completely untenable. About what had to change. What had to change was this: his brother needed a move-out date. Not a suggestion. A date on paper within 90 days. His mother could stay longer, but she would contribute financially. We agreed on an amount that reflected her actual share of expenses. My studio was mine and would remain mine unconditionally. And my husband would be the one to communicate all of this, not me. He agreed to all of it. I believed him, not because he said the right things, but because he looked like a man who had finally looked at something clearly. I came home that afternoon. My brother-in-law had set up a ring light he'd ordered himself, the wrong kind, too warm, clearly bought without research, and had rearranged the furniture in what had been my studio. I stood at the door and said, "This room is mine, I need it back today." He looked at my husband. My husband said, "We talked. You need to move your stuff out. Where am I supposed to go? Your room. Or find your own place. We're going to talk about that timeline this week." My brother-in-law said a lot of things after that. He said we were blindsiding him. He said he'd had plans. He said he was this close to making his channel work and now we were sabotaging him. My mother-in-law came in and there was a conversation that got loud for about 20 minutes. And I sat in the kitchen and drank a glass of water and let my husband handle his family. That was new. That was what we'd agreed. I wasn't going to step in and smooth it over. I wasn't going to apologize or offer a compromise or find a way to make it okay for everyone. I was going to let my husband do the thing he should have been doing for the past 14 months. He did it, imperfectly. There were tears, mostly from his mother. There were raised voices, mostly from his brother. But when it was done, my studio was empty by 7 that evening, and I spent an hour putting it back together exactly the way I like it. His brother moved out 6 weeks later. A friend of his had a house with an extra room, which apparently had been an option the entire time but had never come up as long as my studio was available. His mother started paying $600 a month toward shared expenses. She's still there and it's not perfect, but it's different now. There's a line, my husband holds it. The morning after I moved my things back in, I sat down at my desk for the first time in 4 days and opened my laptop. The light was good. The room was quiet. I had a new project brief in my inbox from a client in Seattle and a coffee going on the warmer my sister had given me for my last birthday, and for a few minutes I just sat there not working, just being in the space that was mine. My husband knocked on the door before he left for work. He didn't come in. He just knocked, which is something he'd stopped doing somewhere in the past year and something I hadn't realized I'd missed until he did it again. "Good luck today," he said. "Thanks," I said. He left. I heard the front door close. I turned back to my screen. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. My brother-in-law still hasn't apologized. My mother-in-law told my husband privately that she thinks I overreacted. The channel never launched, as far as I know. My husband and I are still in the process of figuring out what healthy looks like for us, and some weeks are better than others. But my name is on the deed to this house. My income paid for more than half of what keeps it running. And the room with the good light and the standing desk and the shelf of books, that room is still mine. I still close the door in the morning and I still open it when I'm ready, and nobody sits in my chair without asking. That's the thing about knowing your worth, finally, after too long of quietly doubting it. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come in the form of a speech or a confrontation. It arrives one Tuesday afternoon when you walk into your own room and find someone sitting in your chair. And something in you goes very still and very clear, and you know, without performance, without apology, exactly what belongs to you.